John Jiang. How are you, brother?
Good. How are you? How are you, Brian?
Man, I'm probably a little more excited than I usually am on these things, and I've had some heavy hitters on this show, no doubt. But this is one we've been working for a while to get this thing going. You're a
We
busy
have.
man, and if you just looked at the internet at all, and you're in the comics realm, you could see how busy you are because you put out content, dude. So I feel really gracious for you to be able to cut out some time in your day to be able to do this on Cheers to Comics, man. So thank you.
Oh, cheers. Thank you, guys. I'm really humbled to be on. Like Brian's been saying, we've been trying to make this happen for quite a long time now, and um, scheduling and everything like that. So I'm glad to have a chance to kind of carve that in today. So again, I'm humbled to be on, Brian. Thanks for having me on. And did I hear that your show was like going bonkers or something like that right now? Is that
Dude,
what I hear?
yeah, man. I started looking at some charts and it's like chart topping on two different charts. It's top three in another chart. I never, I mean, it's kind of surreal to see, man. It's exciting. It's
Dude,
cool
right
seeing
on.
comic books dominating, some sort of multimedia market, because I mean there's not like there's any good comic book movies out there or anything like that these days. But no, it's time for comic book podcast to actually have a good name, and it's not, it's cool to I don't know, I got into it because people are they start a podcast and they want to talk shit about what they like, and it's like, you're never going to get John Jiang on your podcast if you talk all you spend an hour just talking about how you hate comics and you call yourself a fan. So here we are, man. 3 years later, I've got John Jang on. I've got some dude. I'm
Oh,
a
I love
fan.
it.
I am. This is
I love it.
awesome.
I love it. Well,
Um,
I've always said that it's sorry to cut you off.
oh, you're good.
But just speaking about comics, it's I always say it's I've worked in film, and I've worked in various creative industries, and I've worked on the Marvel movies since Iron Man 1 and things like that. And I worked on, and when we worked on that movie initially, no one really had any idea who Iron Man was, and
Mm,
that sort of thing. And I was like, shoot, like I would love to work on that movie. And the fact that I got to work on it, and then it went bonkers, and it kicked off what we know as the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and all the other sort of like uh, all the other sort of studios trying to kind of do the same thing with all of their properties and everything like that. And you know I've always said that comic books are essentially American mythology, right?
mm.
It's a way of telling these stories, in graphic form and and things like that. And now that we're seeing them as dramas, that we're seeing them as what they've always been, as we as superhero stories, as more family friendly content, and all the wide variety of ways that you can tell a story and things like that. And I think that it's they're being, as they always have been, I think they're being mined right now for really great ideas to be
Yeah.
converted into other IPs and other media and things like that. So I'm glad that comic books are getting their time in the sun and things like
Yeah. I
that.
mean,
And it is our nature to be to as nerds to hate on things.
I mean,
So
yeah, it's natural. We got to make sure that some of it, we got to weed out some of the weak stuff for sure, no doubt. But at the same time, I mean, but you got to take some time to praise the shit that you love too, man. And there's just, I feel like it's really imbalanced. So,
yeah,
I'm here to pray. Like this is what we want to see when we go to buy a comic book. I mean, if you're not drawing or if you're not buying this, it's because you're afraid of it. John, like the only reason you would walk by a John Jang cover and not buy it is because it terrifies you. And
right, right.
that's I love that about you, man. But before we get too far into, for people like myself that just want to know where all of this came from, all of this talent. I mean, it sounds you've been saying you've always said comic books. Did you discover comic books at a young age? Have you always been a reader, or I mean, when did that come
Yeah,
in?
for me, comic books have always been um, a great, again, you know, being a child of immigrants and things like that, right? It's always about like, how do we tell a story in a very sort of like I said, in a very graphic way, right? And
Mhm.
things like TV and comic books and all those things that have like a narrative within the pictures and all of those things. They've always kind of like been that thing that's been really really connects to me. And I think
Yes.
always, being as an artist and a visual person too, it's just one of those things where it's like, yeah, you know, comic books again has just been always a really great way to not only tell stories but really be expressive and express our styles and express all of the way that we see the world, in a very
Yeah.
visual way. So
Kind
I've always loved, animation and comic books and, all those things. There are a lot of the visual art forms and things like that. So, you know, I wasn't always an avid reader, but if nothing else, I always just look through those like dusty newsprints
there's
and
nothing wrong with that, man. I mean,
yeah,
like, not everyone could afford comics. With me, it was the trading
yeah,
cards. Like
yeah,
all of
yeah.
my knowledge came from the 91 or the Marvel trading cards. And that's how
Oh
I
yeah,
started knowing my shit.
yeah,
Like I can look at people's stats, like, no, Kingpin's stats, he's more than Daredevil stats. So I mean, Kingpin would whatever. I mean, so it's I don't know. I was a nerd in that sense, but it's cool to, yeah, I get where you're coming from there. Were you an artist before you got into comic books, or the comics was just part of your inspiration to get into becoming an
yeah,
artist?
yeah. I think it's one of those things where it's like as at a very young age, I was always kind of like doodling and drawing, and
Yeah,
that was kind of like a good outlet. Kind of always, making art was kind of like my way of not being bored as a kid.
understood.
You know what I mean?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So, having that opportunity, and then like, walking into comic book stores and always, the spinner racks and, things like that, even at like the 7-Elevens and things like that, like I couldn't always get those, but I just loved the sort of visceral sort of like, way of, like I said, maybe it's different now because kids don't have these opportunities, but again, just going and hitting a deli, a 7-Eleven, whatever it may be, and there's a spinner rack of comics, and and that's the thing, you may not ever buy them, but you're just like looking at them, and some of them just become so tattered because
Oh yeah.
I've seen, yeah, some with the spines coming off, and all those
Yeah.
things, but it's just a great opportunity to connect with it, absorb it, and and so I've always loved it. And then I don't think until I was like, maybe I remember having my first job in middle school, things like that, and riding my bike to this job, I would always ride by this comic book shop, and it was this little tiny shop, and I finally went in, and I got, on the spinner rack was what was it, Amazing Spider-Man 298, and
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
just
yeah,
kind of
that'll do
like,
it. Well, McFarlane action.
well, the thing is that I've always loved, back in the day, I really loved like the John Burns and the Basimas, and I'm kind of like showing my age here,
Hmm.
but and all of those guys, Arthur Adams and things like that, like, and again, they had their very expressive styles and everything like that. But really, like, something when I saw that McFarlane with like the big feet and chunky webs, and I
Yes.
tell the story a lot, but it kind of like, it really like unlocked something where I was like, it for a long time, and I think as any artist should at that age, you're trying to get it right. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
You're trying
Well,
to
there
get
was the
anatomy
Marvel
right.
way to draw comics,
Right,
but
right,
that
right.
was before Todd McFarlane. Like Todd McFarlane tore that book up. So I mean, I know what you mean by like you're trying to follow
Right,
this formula, and then
right.
yeah, you
And I
see
think that
that.
yeah, and I think McFarlane kind of like, and with every like, and not just Spider-Man, but like, and then I would look at some of his older stuff that he did, and I was like, holy crap, he did like the Incredible Hulk, and he did,
Mm,
and he did a Batman Year One and things like that. And then what it was that every time he touched one of these characters, he was imbuing and infusing something of his own into these
yes.
characters.
Instantly making them
And
iconic, and I mean, and more than they've ever been. It's
yeah,
insane how you can make the Hulk or Spider-Man more iconic just by drawing them a little differently and giving them
well,
more expression and stuff like
right.
that.
And I think that it's not necessarily like, it's one thing to do the art, right? And I think that's the thing that people don't realize. It's if you can draw a character differently, that's always great. But to draw differently and to get it published, like, I
Mm,
think those are things that people don't really like. I'm sure that his Year One Batman, people were like, the editors and things like that were like, what are you doing with this cape? Like,
right.
that's not what the cape does. Why,
Uh-huh.
or why does the Incredible Hulk have this like giant brow, and why does he, why is this like this hulking, like we've never seen him like that before? Why is Spider-Man so, you know, why is he so flexible? Why are we seeing the bottom of his feet all the time? His big, like those eyes are too big. Like I'm sure that these are like discussions I had, but that's the thing is that it's ballsy to put it on paper. It's ballsy to kind of like push for it, right? It's ballsy to
Right.
say, you know, this is what I see. This is how I express it, you know, and it's always I think sometimes the struggle, sometimes with my art too, like I think people are just like, that's just not how we see certain characters and things like that, right?
Well,
But I think that
how do
we should
you?
push it.
Yeah. See, how do you take that when, I mean, because you, I mean, you do push it with your art, no doubt about it. One of my favorite covers of all time. Just I'm a real fanboy for the Batman Who Laughs. And this Deceased #4 cover, dude, that you did, like that is
Yeah,
like tippy top for me, like top 5
I
covers of all
appreciate it.
time, probably.
I
Um,
appreciate
uh,
it.
but I mean that's a cover that, yes, is meant to be demented and, you know, disturbing. But then you kind of look at, you know, your Harley Quinn with the bleeding eyes. I mean,
Yeah,
how is stuff like that received for you? I mean, I love it. I mean, I bought it. I clearly love
yeah,
it. But
right,
how do you
right.
take that?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of like, you know, when I used to be, I used to be an art director too at like
Hmm.
some Silicon Valley companies, and you know, you kind of get a good understanding of like what it takes to understand a brand, right? And I think that's the other thing too is that you know, anytime you're doing any one of these characters, you're not necessarily just illustrating, right? You're getting a good understanding of the brand, and you're getting a good understanding of the brand of that character, and you're getting a good understanding of the brand of that publisher, and all
Hmm.
those things. And how much can you sort of like push it? You know what I mean?
Yes.
But the thing is that it also is incumbent, I think, on the artist to do try to push it at times, right? Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's you don't certainly want to like stress it to a point where it's broken, but I think that it's good to allow, and I think that you know it goes to show like one good example is like even like Iron Man, things like that, and working on that, you know, the original movie was that I think that was also ways that I think that we have always kind of seen Iron Man in the comic books, but I think introducing it to a new audience, you know, and knowing your audience too, that's the other thing too. And they may not understand or may not have ever seen Iron Man that way. And
Yeah.
to kind of like do certain things, show certain gadgets, you know, all those things that normally we wouldn't see, but it is good to kind of like flex that a little bit so that you know we can kind of say, hey, okay, there's opportunities and possibilities that this character, this publisher, or whatever it may be, there's places we can still go, right? And
Hmm.
so we got to get a slice of that every once in a while.
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah, man.
maybe you know maybe some people hearing this are like, no, we don't want that. But
Well, that's just like their opinion, man. I mean, yeah,
yeah,
I dig it, man. I dig it. I love how you push the envelope, because it's the thing that really attracted to me. I think that the first cover that I saw of yours, that I was like, who the fuck is this? Was Deceased #1,
oh
that
yeah,
Joker cover.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I mean that amazing. But all of your Deceased work, it's some of my favorite stuff. But your Ice Cream Man, everything you do, it's just, it's pushed, and it lets you know, like, there's so many. One of the biggest complaints in comics is, oh, I went and picked up this cover because it looked really cool, but it had nothing to do with the fucking story.
yeah,
With this, like, you know, you're doing a horror book, so
yeah,
it's going, I mean, you know that this is Ice Cream Man. If you were just read the title Ice Cream Man, you'd like, that sounds kind of foo-foo. But then you look at
yeah.
that cover, and John Jiang is going to make sure that, you know, this is a horror book. You
Right,
know,
right.
Deceased, you're gonna know that this isn't just a, oh, we're DC's doing a lighthearted kill it, you know, kill a few characters story. No, everybody dies, and you get a really good you get a, yeah, so that's one thing that you do stay true to when you do a cover as well. You let the people know what the hell you're gonna get. And most of the time it is horror or horrific, and even when it's
Yeah,
not, it's badass, like your GI Joe stuff. Like,
I
it's,
appreciate it.
you know you're gonna and it's just, it's what you want, man.
Well,
um
the thing is that with cover work, it's kind of tough too because I think it's a balance, right? Because
mm,
you want to. It's how do I say? It's almost like an appetizer. You want to let that person who ordered that appetizer know what kind of restaurant they're in, but you don't want to give them the full 7 course meal
mhm,
quite right away. You know what I mean? And I think that's the difference between like really like storytelling on a cover and like really like giving it all up, or
yes,
just kind of like subtly like indicating certain things and you know putting at least in my opinion, like really cementing a mood, right? And a
Mm,
feeling and an emotion. And I think after that, that's enough to kind of like let the person pick up the cover and say, okay, I'm intrigued and everything like that, right? And I think with variant covers, it's kind of tough too, because it's almost like, there's times when it's like, I often ask, what's the story about? What's this issue
mhm.
about? And I may or may not get like a lot of, you know, thorough responses and things like that, but it's okay. I can kind of, you know, get whatever and glean whatever information I can. But there's times
Right.
too when it's like you want to know some idea, and then when knowing those things, I don't, I selectively put certain things in and don't, right? So that
Gotcha.
we're just kind of saying, hey, let's just bring them in and let's entice them with the art. I think that's great if someone's buying a variant cover for my art, but then they actually are gonna like either read that issue or buy it on like buy a digital version and all stuff, because
Mhm.
they're like, I'm intrigued enough by this image to want to read it as well too. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So
Yes, and I mean I think something that a lot of cover artists don't really I can't say a lot, but there are cover artists out there that don't really play true to that. They're like, "Oh, cool, I'm gonna get paid this bunch of money to do this book because it's Marvel," and bam, there's your Iron Man. Doesn't matter what it is, it's Iron Man. This is what you
right,
got, and you're
right,
on your way. And
right, right,
it's nice to know that you do have that love and appreciation for this genre. It's not just a paycheck for you like some people kind of treat it, especially just variant cover artists or a cover artist. That it really is a lot of times just a paycheck because there's something bigger and better going on. Then there's not a lot of money in comics. I mean that's real.
yeah,
Sure, it could pay the bills, but it's not gonna make anybody filthy rich.
right,
It's
right.
so I don't know. It's refreshing to see somebody that does as many exclusive covers as you do put love into what's actually going on beyond the cover. So
Right,
I
right.
dig it, man. I dig it.
Well, I think the thing is that at the end of the day, it's like like you said, I think there's this impression sometimes, like whatever me, it's like it is what it is, right? It's like and comparatively, I've worked in, like I said, I've worked in film, I've worked in Silicon Valley, I've worked in comics. Then let's like you said, let's be real. It's like comics are not the most lucrative in terms of like you know sort of monetary gains and things like that,
Right.
but you know to me, in terms of like really great sort of like exposure to your work, exposure to
Hmm.
your name, like it's immensely like fulfilling, you
I
know what I
guess
mean?
fulfilling is the word, because I mean I
Right,
don't think it could really get any more fulfilling than being this big of a part of the comic book fan base. Because I mean this
right.
is this is the future of all entertainment right here. These silly books. I
Well,
mean
that's what I mean.
everything.
It's like, yeah, and going back to what I said earlier, it's like the fact that it is, like I said, it is modern American mythology. You're being a part of that. You're being a part of popular culture. You're carving, a little bit here or there of like, like you said, the way that you see things, and you're infusing, your vision onto popular culture. And if and at the end of the day, too, it's like for me, it's like the reason why I care about it. It's also too, it's like like I said, I do care about the craft. I care
Mhm.
about you know also leaving something behind that I can feel, very proud of, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And things like that.
Yes.
So, I have a lot of pride in that. So it's very rewarding. So
That's awesome, man.
yeah.
I have to ask. I don't get enough artists on this podcast because you guys are busy as shit. But how was the support from your family when that you decided, okay, I want to be an artist? Because that's terrifying. It's the most important job on the entire planet. People don't realize that because without artists, nobody could sketch the blueprints for the brainiacs to do. Or it really coming down to it, artists are the most important people on the planet, but at the same time the least paid until you die. And then so as a parent, as much as I love comics now, if my 7-year-old daughter says I'm going to try to be a comic book artist, even I'm like, like that's,
Yeah.
I love it, but I'm probably going to be supporting you until you're 30, until you figure it out. um but so I mean how was your family receptive of that?
it, it's yeah, it's tough. It's one of those things where it's like, I think also too, they kind of like we're already kind of very much on the fence. Like my mom and dad are, and again, I don't want to be like, I'm just going to play up the stereotypes. They're the typical sort of like Asian parents and things like
Okay.
that, right? And so it's like, it's already, in terms of like wanting to be an artist, you've already got like you're already like a couple chips down, like, in terms of like the support and everything like that. It's hard for them to kind of, especially because they came here to this country and they had nothing, and they built up what they had, and for me to kind of like say, well, I'm gonna like toss in your faces and I'm gonna become an artist and everything like that. But I think that they also realize is that that's exactly why they came here, is so we'll have these opportunities, these choices to make, and things like that. And ultimately too, at the end of the day, I think that they just kind of knew like that's just what was in me, like.
Yeah.
And if it was something else that I was doing, I probably wouldn't be as happy. And I could go down the route of being like, even though I didn't really have the grades to show it, like, a doctor, a lawyer, or whatever. But, ultimately at the end of the day, they probably realized I'm just going to be wasting time, because ultimately my path is still going to go down where it's bound to go down, just because I probably, again, would not be a very happy individual and things like that. So, I think that they supported me. And I think that, early on too, being, like I said, working in Silicon Valley, working in film and things like that, they're like, oh, you can kind of make a lucrative sort of, decent way of living and everything like that. And then I said, well, I'm going to go even deeper now. I'm going to get into comic books. And,
I'm going to make even less money than you expected me to make.
No, but it's, it's been good, but it's, they know too, like, I've never been happier. So
see, that's really important too, because I come from a similar situation where I had these extremely high expectations, and I was starting to kind of get there, and I was like, I'm liking this comic book shit, and I fell back into my thing, and I gave up everything to do this. And like, what the fuck are you doing? But now, I mean, I send them pictures of, look, I'm #1 on the charts, and they're like, well, I mean, I don't know if that means you're paying the bills, but that means you haven't asked me for money, and so
well,
I don't know.
I think that. Well,
I think it's.
I think this
Go ahead.
goes back to what we were saying too, is that there's this also a methodology and a mindset of how to do it back then. Maybe I don't want to sound like, because again, I'm old myself, but
no, you're right.
It's like nowadays we have a lot of opportunities to expose our work, whatever that may be that we're doing. If it's podcasting, if it's and YouTubing or art or all of those things, there's more of it out there. There's, than ever before. Like, but there's more opportunities if you really work it to show your work. You know what I mean? And to get yourself out there. And I think that's a great opportunity right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything more impressive than a self-sustaining artist, like an artist that can just keep it going. I mean, to me, that's I'm more impressed by an artist that can just make a living off of creating happiness on pen and paper or digitally or however it may go than an Elon Musk type of character. I really do. Yes, sure, they've got the brains and all of that shit, but when it comes down to it, I mean, it's just everybody wants to be an artist, and everybody gives up as soon as they realize they can't do it. Most people give up as soon as they realize, I can't draw like John Jiang, or I can't draw like Jim Lee, or whoever, because I don't. But it's the devotion it takes to be able to get to that point, and most of the time you are going to have negative people behind you saying, I don't think that's the right thing to do. And I don't know, I love it, because it's to see someone like yourself, come from all of that. And I mean, I've got your fucking art on my walls, dude. Like it has been since I've owned it. It's impressive. It really is. And I don't know. It's awesome to see. This is what I love about this fucking industry, man.
I think it's one of those things where it's like, it's I don't ever want to I don't ever want to give the impression that I didn't get support. I think that's the thing, is that I've always gotten the greatest support from my family then, my family now, and everything like that. But the thing is that it's oftentimes, much like art, there's not really a metric to measure it, right? It's really subjective. It's really, a couple people may like your art and like a vast majority may not. You know what I mean? Or whatever that may be. And then you may be hot one minute and you maybe not the next, and all of those things. And I think that that's the thing, is that you know, being how people understand, I think, how to do and how to make a living and all of those things, you know, and how to do it. It's they're just looking out for us. Do you know what I mean? I think ultimately at the end of the day, they're trying to make sure that we're okay, you know,
Yeah.
and things like that. And I think that's the thing is that I do I do lectures at, you know, some art schools and things like that every once in a while. And I think that, you know, I always say there's three key components to really, you know, making it as an artist. And there's a lot of nuances, there's a lot of in-betweens and all stuff, but the main key things are you obviously have to be talented, right?
Yes.
To some degree. Can you get talented and can you work hard? That's the other thing. You can work harder. You can keep practicing. You can get yourself to a certain level, right? And all those things. And then you have to be professional. You have to be able to
Hmm.
communicate. You have to be able to um,
Deadlines.
kind of sell your work, you know, sell yourself, and you know all those things, and you know stand behind your work and explain it, and be a good professional to your clients, right? You know, maybe
Yeah.
I'm going on the fourth thing, but the fourth thing is, like you said, it's not to give up, because that's the thing is that, you
Hmm.
know, you're always, life happens and it's always tough to kind of like say this is what I want. But that's the thing is that that doesn't necessarily mean you just say this is what I want. You're going to have to figure it out. What is it
Yes.
that I need to have happen to make this thing, an art career, happen, right? What is it? What are all those things that it needs to take? And it's not just, so not giving up is not just say I'm not going to give up, but it's actually working towards that goal, actively
Yes.
working towards that goal. Yeah.
Following through. Yeah, man. I
Yeah.
love it. We just got a John Jiang seminar. This is awesome. I love it. No, there are a lot of aspiring
That'll be
creators that listen to this
99.99.
show. You're right. What's your Venmo? I'll have them Venmo, yeah.
Yeah.
I love it, man. So kind of breaking off a little bit.
Yeah.
You do a tremendous amount of exclusive covers. I mean, this is
Yeah.
no, I have to, just out of curiosity, really. What are your kind of standards? Because I imagine you get approached quite often. Like now that you see as much as you see your art.
Yeah.
What are your standards for that when somebody approaches you for a comic book cover?
Yeah, you know, it's you know, I have my regular clients and things like that, you know, so you know I'm always looking out for them, you know,
Hmm.
first and foremost, and things like that. We're looking out for also, you know, good opportunities, right? It's like,
Yes.
you know, so it's like, hey, you know, this big story arc is happening, and you know, and you know these artists are going to be involved in it. You know, one of the first things that I got kind of like, you know, I'd done the deceased, and doing deceased, I was kind of like, I was, you know, I was doing art and I liked it, and somebody's like, hey, you know, do you want to do some covers for DC? I was like, yeah, that's a great opportunity. That rocks. You know what I mean? And then I started getting more and more variants, and then, you know, I was hearing whispers of this Turtles book called The Last Ronin and everything like that.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then like, you know, A, B, C, and D artists were going to be involved, and I was like, shit, like this sounds like kind of a big thing,
Yeah,
and things like
man.
that. So you know, getting a, like I said, getting an opportunity to work on stuff like that, and also too, the other standard is, again, doing stuff that you love, right? It's
Ah,
like, you know, I love horror, I love mechs, I love, you know, the more
yes.
intense sort of like visual opportunities, which is always great. But it's also nice to be pushed and nice to be taken out of that comfort zone and do
Okay.
things that, yeah, are like stylistically or content wise, not things that you are always that comfortable with, and seeing where that journey takes you. Because I think, you know, art is not one drawing, it's not one piece, it's not, you know, one
Hmm.
cover. It's art is the whole journey that you're going to be on for all of your being and all your existence. And I'm getting very existential here, but
No,
you
dude,
know,
this is what we're here for, man. This is awesome. I
but
love it.
yeah, it's taking that windy road and seeing where it takes you and stuff. So
Is there any type of character or title or anything out there that you would just say, I no, I would never do that. This is not my thing. Like
I,
it's just, yeah,
I honestly don't think so. Like
yeah.
I
Always gonna
will
push it.
I will always say, if you know, and but obviously it's like a scheduling thing. It's, you know, all,
Right.
you know, if all the stars align and things like that, and and whatever that may be, I'm always inclined to be like, what can I do with this? Like,
That's awesome.
yeah,
That's awesome to hear.
yeah, what approach can I take to this? So that we're either like, doing it some justice and kind of like, really polishing up, or we take it to a new place, right? And it's like, if and there's and I think that's the beauty about doing variant covers too, is that, I think there's also some leeway in terms of like, the publishers that are like, yeah, we want them to kind of like, we want to allow them to do their own thing, and things like that. And sometimes we get great opportunities to just do, crazy things. And I think that normally in a normal sort of like, in that sort of regular sort of like, you know cover A and cover B, we may not get that opportunity. But with variant covers, I think we really get to push it. And I think that's why you see such a wide range of styles,
Hmm.
artists, and all those things in the variant, industry. And I think that that's, to me, it's, I've always loved guys like Delato and Perillo, and
Oh yeah. No,
yeah,
there's
all
some
those
amazing
guys.
ones out there. I mean, it's an
Yeah.
endless list, really. It's crazy to think how many amazing artists out there are like that. But yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's awesome, man.
Yeah.
So with with these, well, I guess I have to ask it this, but is there a care? I've got a million questions for you, man. I want to get ahead of
Sure,
myself.
man.
No, is there a character out there that you just you cannot wait to get your hands on? I
Yeah.
mean, just yeah. Which
There's a
one is it?
there's a there's a ton. And
Yeah.
that's the thing, is that, it's I've already had an opportunity. Like I said, I've been very blessed, very lucky to have worked on a lot of things that I grew up with. Also cinematically too, right?
Hmm.
Having to, being able to work on, like I said, Iron Man since, the first Marvel movie, and, helping to design the Hulkbuster suit, and, you know, doing a huge part in designing Shredder and the Turtles, and, all those things, and working on Transformers, and, and then working, I loved Voltron and Godzilla growing up, and getting to work on Pacific Rim, cinematically and everything like that.
Jeez,
It was
yeah,
just,
man.
again, just mind blowing, sort of like dream come true. And then being able to now in comic books really kind of like be very expressive with my own style, and working on characters like, I've gone to work on, Batman, Joker, the Batman Who Laughs, and a lot of independent comic books too. And we're getting to work on the Last Ronin and the Transformers. All that stuff has kind of been, very, very blessed. But with that being said, I think that there's a lot out there that still is yet to be done, right?
Oh yeah, man. I mean,
Oh
my
yeah,
mind, there's a million things I want to see you do. Like, I
yeah.
mean, just off the top of my head, I would love a Moon Knight cover from you, dude. Like, I
Oh
think
my God.
that would be just the gem on my wall. I think that's probably the only thing I think I could top this this deceased cover here, man. But I mean, you have this style that, I mean, I would love to see you do any. I mean, shit, I'm not even like a anime or a manga fan, but I would dig like a Sailor Moon
Oh my
cover from
God.
you, dude. Like the
Oh,
shit
for
that you
sure.
do, like it's
Yeah,
oh
yeah.
man,
And
yeah.
and I think that goes back to, when you said earlier, like, where does this all come from? And and I think that, I get asked this question a lot. I do a lot of conventions. I do a lot of these, talks with, art students and things like that, and these interviews. And I always get asked, what's the where did your like what's your influences, right? And
Mhm.
I don't really, like, I feel like when I answer it this way, I feel like I'm copping out, but I'm not copping out. And I honestly am being very truthful and genuine here. It really does come from everywhere, right? I
How
always
could it
talk
not,
about,
man?
yeah,
I think
I
that's
always
the
talk
only
about,
right answer, to be
yeah,
honest, because
yeah,
if you're a fan, then yes, it came from everywhere. It's
yeah. Like I said, I'm a very visual person, and I always talk about the visual vernacular, the visual vocabulary, and right. And it's like, for me, I'm always absorbing it, right? If I'm looking at architecture, if I'm looking at a fine art painting, and if I'm looking at graffiti on the street, if I'm looking at nature, if I'm looking at texture of something that's, even concrete or a rock, or, whatever it may be, it's always kind of like being embedded in that visual vocabulary, right? I'm always absorbing it. So, like I said, whether it be graffiti, whether it be anime, whether it be, comic books, or
Mhm.
whether it be, manga, whether it be, Renaissance art, impressionistic art, all of that stuff. If I have an opportunity to kind of like help and do something to kind of like throw my hat into to those, those genres or things, something like that, I would love the opportunity to do it, so, like you said, if I was to be asked to do a Sailor Moon, I'd be like, hell yeah, like, you know
It's
what I mean,
awesome.
like.
It's so cool hearing coming from the guy that did this fucking deceased cover right here. Ah, the Sailor Moon. Like that's broad strokes, man. I love it. That's
Well, lately I've been doing more like sort of like cartoonish styles just to see if it will, because I think that that's the other thing too, is that everyone wants you to kind of be a certain thing, and I think that it's always nice to kind of evolve, right?
yeah.
And if you throw out something that, is like you said, like if I do the Batman Who Laughs and the Ice Cream Mans that are very intense,
Hmm.
and then I do something that's very cartoonish, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's my style. I'm just taking a step on a journey, right?
Yes.
And again, wherever that leads me, and that sort of thing too. So, if I get that opportunity, like I said, I'll always jump at it.
I
So
dig it. I dig it, man. I
yeah,
mean, because look at Scotty Young's a great example of that too, because he's got
for
his little
sure.
baby stuff, and then he's got everything else that he does that's not his, baby Marvel stuff. And it's, I don't know,
Yeah.
it's, but at the same time, you could relate both styles to the guy. It's okay to have different styles all relate to one person. And I think that if anything, that's the most impressive thing you could be,
Well, I think,
this,
yeah. And I think that's the thing is that, I think that when we talk about art and artists, I think everyone wants to have this, there's this impression that it's just about, I think, us, right?
mm,
And it's just about us individually and isolated. But I think really what it is, it's very communal, right? So
yes.
yeah, if I'm doing art and I'm sharing it with you, like you love it, you dig it, and then if I like am changing the style a little bit, I may share it with like a new group of people. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
And it
Yes.
becomes a it becomes a like a really like it's a communal journey, right? It's
God
like
forbid the artist expand his audience. Jesus Christ. I mean, maybe not everybody wants to be terrified in their comic book covers, like
yeah,
I love it, man. I love that you have the right mindset in this to have a forever career in doing this. I don't see anybody getting dull on your work. I know you said that sometimes you're hot, sometimes you're not. As long as you keep putting out stuff like this, man, and you're gonna be going on forever as long as you want to, I guess. I mean, as long as you, but yeah, like I said, there's not a lot of money in this to keep people motivated, but at this point, it's the love, man, and it really does show through in your work and everything you do. Like this entire conversation has been really just a showcase of how you truly appreciate and love
I
this
appreciate
goddamn
it.
industry. So
Yeah,
it's awesome, man.
yeah,
I probably have time for one more question because I know you're pressed for
sure,
time,
man.
and I gotta
Yeah,
find it on my
yeah,
long list here. But I
you got to
just
select that one choice question here.
right, I
So
guess, yeah. But just because this is kind of like the origin episode, if you will, because I have a feeling there's going to be at least another time or two we get
oh
together on
yeah,
the mic,
we
man.
get we got to franchise this thing. We got to turn it into like
Let's do it.
sequels and everything
Let's
like
do it, man.
that.
But I want to talk about your first breakout experience into comics. That first, you're gonna do a comic book. I want you to do this cover. I mean, what was the situation there? Who approached you? What was the feeling after being a comic book lover like you are? Let's talk about that a
Yeah,
little bit.
it's kind of weird because like I said, I've prior to doing that, I was already, like I said, I was always, to me, it's kind of weird because am I getting some sort of like weird light on me? Anyways.
I bet your face is kind of warm right now, man. You got a light
um
coming across your face right now for the listeners. Like, you're just
yeah, it's
listening.
it's a it's a it's a beam of a higher divine spirit here, but
Yeah, it looks like Cyclops is coming in on you, dude.
um I think what to me like what's weird is that I've always seen characters and properties as those things, right? So it's like when I worked on the Iron Man movies, I didn't really distinguish it too much from the fact that, hey, I'm working on Iron Man. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Ah, yeah, okay. So you already
I'm
kind of
working.
had that feeling before you got the comic book cover. 'Cause I mean,
Don't get me
it's got to be
wrong.
surreal.
Yeah, it's totally surreal, and seeing it on the big screen, and and the Avengers and all those things. I was just like, oh my god, I'm just like I'm on cloud nine, right?
Hmm.
But yes, there was that sort of like, so with that being said, I kind of had that feeling a little bit, but then I did have that sort of like breakout sort of moment. And I was always kind of already doing, independent titles here or there, but I guess the big sort of break we already talked about was Deceased, right?
That
So,
was the one that put you on the map. All right, cool. So I mean, it's the
right,
one that got my attention for sure.
right,
So
right.
that's
So
awesome, man.
especially, and what's weird, just to give more context around the whole thing, is that I didn't really like, as again, because I had already been working in film, I didn't really understand what was happening when I was doing Deceased. Let me just say,
Uh-huh.
like, I'd been like doing conventions already too, and I've already kind of been around variant covers, but I didn't really understand what variant covers were, right? Like,
Ah,
all I
okay.
knew was that I was like walking by some tables, and like I would see like a Perillo, or like I said, a Delato or Matina and things like that, and these, I would say, kind of like offshoots, because they weren't, you could kind of tell they weren't kind of like part of the regular sort of like
Right. They weren't a B cover for
core,
sure.
right? Like a, main cover, B cover, whatever it may be. And I was like, oh my God, these are fantastic paintings and all that stuff. I'd love to be doing those, someday. But I didn't really know that they were like a thing, right?
Mm.
And whatnot. And then I was always kind of like, I had a group of people who were always very supportive. One of those, folks was Sean Hidashko from Comics Elite, and he would always
Okay.
come by and be like, "Hey, I really love your art. I'd love to get you on a variant cover someday, or do a cover." And I'm like,
I gotta
"Yeah,
shake that dude's
sure."
hand, man. Seriously. Because I mean, I think I think these are all Comics Elite variants I have here.
Yeah, yeah,
So yeah,
yeah,
no, I mean, I gotta shake that dude's hand for for exposing you in this way, man.
yeah.
It's
And
uh
yeah, and he was always like, and I never knew what that meant. Like, he was just like, "Oh, let's do one." And I was like, "Okay, okay." And then I was at, I think it was Emerald City one year,
yeah.
and some guys came up and looked at my work, and super friendly, and they're like, "We're from DC Comics, and we'd love to, we're doing this new
DC
thing."
Comics. They had to reiterate it.
Yeah, I was like, "Who?" No, no, just kidding. I was like, I was really excited. I was really kind of like school, fanboying really, really hard and all that stuff. But they were just like, we we have this thing coming up with some DC characters, and yeah, I had already done a couple pieces that were kind of like horrific versions of some of the characters, and they
Hmm.
were like, "We really think that you're built for this and all that stuff." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm your man. I would
Awesome.
love to do it."
That's so
And it
cool,
just,
man.
yeah, it
Uh,
took off
uh,
from there.
I so I can't imagine I mean, like you said, you had that Iron Man feeling, and then well, I guess it'd be about 8 years then, since between Iron Man 1 and Deceased #1, something like that. Maybe 10 years, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah, yeah,
So I mean, you do have quite the gap before you get that. Oh shit, I'm doing something new in comics again. Like so, man, it's and to be approached by DC in that way, for them to come
yeah.
to you, I mean, it says a lot, man. It says quite a bit because
Well, I
they
think the thing that really kind of like really floored me in that conversation was that they were like, "We want you to do these characters, and we want you to do it in your style."
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah,
and I was like,
that's the yeah attention getter right
and
there.
for
Your style.
yeah, then, and for the longest time, it was always been like, because like you said, sometimes the my style can be a little bit more, I guess you could say, intense and things like that. And
Mhm.
I was like, "You sure? You like,
Mhm.
you want my style? Like, I'll give it to you.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
You may regret it."
that's so
So,
awesome, man. Well, I couldn't be happier this all worked out for you, John. Really. Like I'm a
yeah,
fan.
appreciate
I
it.
didn't when I first discovered your work on Deceased, I thought that I had a million things that I had to go back and find. I didn't realize that you were just breaking out, man. So yeah, I couldn't understand why when I Googled your name at first, I was like, where is everything else? You know, like now I Google your name and it's just scroll, scroll, scroll. Like I was showing some people at Mile High Comics the other day, and I was like, ah, I'm looking for John Jiang covers, and I had to kind of was like, you don't know who John Jiang is, and I showed them on Google, and they're like, what the fuck is this? I got, yeah, man. I mean, it's
I appreciate it.
it's hard to find anybody out there that is not. You just have to. Really, the only thing I could think of is if you're just afraid. You don't like scary things. Like that's the only
Yeah,
reason I could think of
yeah,
why you would pass up on your books, man. So I'm really I know that you're pressed for time.
yeah,
I do have an entire notepad of questions for next time though, brother. You
yeah.
sort of know
Let's
how to
do it.
answer a question. I like that. uh,
Maybe too much in some people's opinion, but
Never,
you know,
never.
yeah,
Dude, if I ask one question and it's an hour-long answer, that's the best podcast I've ever had.
yeah.
Dude, really, John, it's been an absolute pleasure. I know you're a busy man. We will be in touch very soon, sir. Thank you for
Yeah, let's do
everything that
it.
you've
Let's
done,
do it.
man. All
Yeah,
right.
like I said, I'm very happy to be on the show. I'm super humbled, and you know, this has been fun. And like I said, we'll do it again for sure.
Sweet, brother. All right,
All right,
man. We'll
man.
talk to you soon.
All right.
Cheers.
Peace, guys. Thanks.
Later.
This is the Cheers to Comics podcast. I'm John Jiang. It's been a great show. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed it, and definitely be back for the next one. Thanks, guys.